Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm bringing you another draw with me, except this time I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my digital art process. So first, I usually grab my sketchbook, sit down, sketch a little bit, and if I come up with something that I like, I take it into Procreate, or occasionally I'll sketch right into Procreate, but I'm not as good at that. I've only done it like 2 times. So I typically just do it in my sketchbook and I take a picture of it on my phone. I will adjust the exposure and the different little elements until it looks a little bit more black and white, because it usually has a little bit of a tint to it anyway. I'll put it on the luminosity blend mode because that kind of also takes the color out of it. And then I'll turn the opacity down so that I can see my line art better when I'm drawing on it. For my line art, I tend to keep it pretty loose. I don't ever really do super clean line art. If my line art is on the messier side, I will go in and redo some of it to make it look cleaner, but I usually do that after I've already colored everything. I do like to have line art, but I don't necessarily know how to make it super clean. Like, there's people who, their line art is beautiful, and I'd love to learn how to do that, but for now, I think it still ends up looking fine when I just have my looser line art sketch over my flat colors. Something I've been doing recently, as you'll see in this video, is I will put grayscale shading under my sketch before I do the colors, because you know how you have your sketch, your original sketchy sketch, and it just has this quality to it. Well, I put a lot of shading in my original sketches when I draw them, and I end up not liking how the line art just looks over the flat colors when I first do them. And of course, when I go in and color and shade everything, it ends up looking better. But I'm kind of impatient, so I'm like, oh, this looks horrible, I have to redo the line art 20 times. But I find if you do a little grayscale shading, you're like, oh, okay, I can see where this is going. So I like to do that. I got this idea from artists who fully render their pieces in grayscale first and then go in and adjust the colors after. And that way you can see where the contrast is going to be. I'm personally used to just going in and doing the flat colors and the shading and all that first, but I like this happy medium that I have here. After I do the line art and the shading underlay, I go to the adjustment menu, then I click on curves, and I'll click on the red section and I'll turn that up and then turn the overall gamma curve down so that there's kind of a pink red tone to the sketch. Sometimes I just straight up draw the line art in red, but it really just depends on my mood that day, I guess. So after all that, I'm ready to lay down my flat colors. I won't lie, I am not the best at pre-planning what colors I want to use. I kind of experiment a lot during the drawing. During this drawing, I knew that I wanted a kind of sunflower look. I wanted her hair to have little yellow flowers in it, and I had envisioned that her shirt was going to be yellow and that her mouth was going to be red. So all of that kind of ended up being in the drawing. But I also thought maybe I could do yellow and blue or green and yellow and have some kind of either fall vibes or spring vibes. I wasn't 100% sure. So this time, instead of just winging it or doing the first thing I see, I did make little thumbnails of her. I duplicated the canvas and made her small and then duplicated those layers a bunch of times. And I changed her shirt just to see which one I liked better because I kind of had orange in my mind and I wasn't entirely sure which one I wanted to use in the final design. I kept orange as an alternate option, but I still went with what I envisioned in my head and used yellow. I should probably use that technique more often and in general plan out my designs ahead of time a little bit more. I have an unfinished drawing from last week and I did like how it was turning out, but I was so wishy-washy on the colors. I didn't like the color of the shirt and I didn't really have a plan. I kind of was just going on a concept and I had too many ideas mixed into one. I kind of wanted to make it a Pisces birthday, ocean, stars, galaxy thing. It was kind of like too many ideas in one, even though they kind of relate to each other, and it just did not turn out well for me and I just gave up on it. Maybe I'll go back to it because I did like how she was turning out, but I just didn't know where to go. So I think making those little thumbnails can help because then you can kind of see if an idea is working or not. Another thing you might notice me do throughout this piece is you'll see that the colors go from colors to black and white or gray scale. And how I did that was I put a gray layer, I filled a blank layer with gray, then I went to the color blend mode and that made everything just gray, and I do that to see how well the colors contrast with each other because it's good to have a different range of value in your drawing, and you might not see that when you have different colors together, but when you do that you can see, is my hair darker than the skin, is the shirt darker or lighter than the background. It's just helpful to see the value changes. I don't do this all the time, especially with Draw This in Your Styles. I kind of just see, I use what colors the artist used typically. I'm kind of just focusing on making it look like my style but with their color scheme, I guess. But if it's my own art, I will try to make sure that there's a wide range in values. Not all the time, but I think it's a good thing to get in the habit of. For rendering, I try a bunch of different techniques. I have like a jillion favorite artists right now, and I love what they all do, and they all do something differently. So I kind of just switch it up here and there. For this one, I used an airbrush to do the light shadows around the face and the arms, and then I went in and some of the shadows are with a slightly harder brush. I don't think any of them were with a super hard brush. I think they're all kind of soft-ish, but I went in with a harder brush, especially that big shadow on her neck. I did that with a harder brush. And then some of the lip shadows are a little bit harder, and all of the highlights. I feel like I always forget how I drew my last drawing by the time I get to my next one. So my style is maybe not as consistent as other people's, and that's okay because it's changing. I'm getting better every month, I would even say. I'm striving to do better and learn more techniques all the time. So yeah, but this is what I'm doing right now. This might be what I do for my next couple pieces until I'm like, hey, I like this technique, and then do that. And now we're at my favorite part of this drawing, and that's the hair. I had an absolute blast making it. I put basic shadows around the hair where I thought they would be darker just due to the lighting situation, and I also put some other shadows throughout the hair to give it a little bit of texture. And for those shadows, I just used a soft airbrush. Then I kind of did some experiments with how I wanted to do the curls. I ended up going with this kind of sideways U shape for the darker parts, but for the lighter parts, there were more S coils in there, and I liked how it turned out. So yeah, pretty much a bunch of wiggly lines. And I made sure to use a darker hair color for the shadows and a lighter color for the highlights, just so it adds a little bit of volume. Then I took out some of the flowers that I had originally drawn in there. It was looking a little bit too crowded, and spacing them out more seemed to help a lot, and I think the flowers in the hair were really cute. I then went into a little bit more detail in the flowers, at least the yellow ones. I didn't end up really messing with the white ones because they were so small. But for the yellow ones, I put some orange in the middle, and I went to Gaussian blur and I blurred those out a little bit. So it gave the flowers a little bit more depth. After this, I pretty much just go in and nitpick at little details. If there's some color outside the lines, I try to get it. If there's some missing white spaces, I try to cover those up. And sometimes I still miss things. I will get to the eyebrows. I totally forgot to do those until the last minute. So you'll see me do that at the very end. But yeah, I just kind of go in and put some more details, erase things, fix any errors that I see, adjust opacities, just random stuff until I'm happy. And to finish off the drawing, I usually put noise and a gradient map in. For the noise, I open a blank layer, fill it with gray, I go to the adjustments tab, and I click on noise, and then I just adjust it to my heart's desire. Then, for this one at least, I put it on overlay, and then turned it down to about 10%, I want to say, until I think you can kind of see the noise, but not too much. For the gradient map, I just copy the canvas without the background and the noise, and then I paste it onto a blank layer. I will go to the gradient map tab, and I will pick whichever one I think looks best for my drawing. I usually put the gradient map on a darker blend mode. I've done a lighter one once, or a combination of the two, just to see how that works, but for this one I just put it on darker color or multiply or something like that. And sometimes I like to do that first so that you can see what the color looks like when it's blended and the opacity is turned down. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. That last step just changes the colors ever so slightly, and I feel like it makes it look a little bit more cohesive. And that's it for my Procreate process. I hope you found some of that helpful. I will probably go into more detail in the future, but that's just the brief overview of the steps that I take when I draw in Procreate. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a comment, like, or subscribe down below. And I will see you all later. Bye!